Hello, you're on the Ruslan Belov channel. Today we'll discuss the situation in Ukraine as of April 4th, 2025. A tremendous number of events have taken place today, so let's get started. Before we begin, I'd like to sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription helps the channel grow. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. We'll start with the Zaporizhia direction over the past day. According to certain cartographers, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to expand their zone of control northwest of the settlement of Piatikatki during a smooth, fluid offensive. These tree lines came under the control of Russian units today. Let me remind you that yesterday, the Ministry of Defense reported the clearing of the settlement of Lobkov. Today, the nearby tree lines were secured. We can see for ourselves that this is a gradual leveling of the front line along the settlements of Luhov, Lobkov and Stepov. That is, all these small wooded areas are being gradually cleared by the Russian army, and the settlement of Kamianka is being semi-encircled step by step. Next, we move to the Kostyantynivka sector of the front, where a lot of information is also coming from. We'll begin with the settlement of Velyka. Just yesterday, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported the complete clearing of this village in its briefing, and today pro-Russian sources have published objective control footage. This video shows a Russian soldier planting the victory banner on the roof of one of the buildings in the northern part of Velyka. These images serve as 100% proof that this village is currently under the firm control of the Russian armed forces. Some cartographers and experts claim that after clearing Velyka, the Russian army has advanced further north along the Mokry Yali River toward the settlement of Fedorivka. There are also reports that heavy fighting is currently taking place on the southern outskirts, in the southern part of the village itself. Next, we move to the Kostyantynivka direction itself. Here too, Russian units have been reported advancing in the fields between the settlements of Konstantinopel and Rozliv. This information was published and circulated today by various pro-Russian and neutral cartographers. So far, Ukrainian sources have not confirmed the advance of Russian units close to the settlement of Kostyantynivka. Then we move to the Pokrovsk sector of the front, where fighting continues for Kotlina and the Udachinsky salient. But today the map has been adjusted in favor of the Russian Federation. Let me remind you that over the past few days, we have repeatedly discussed reports of strikes toward the settlement of Solon and claims of advances toward Kotlina by the Ukrainian armed forces. However, by the end of April 4th, most of these reports were not confirmed by objective control footage. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense once again reported the complete clearing of the settlement of Uspinivka, where fighting had been ongoing for roughly 3 months. These 3 streets in the Pokrovsk direction saw the fiercest and most brutal fighting, possibly in the last year and a half. Combat here was extremely intense, and over the past 3 months, Uspinivka may have changed hands 3 or 4 dozen times. There may have been cases where, in the morning, the settlement was under the full control of the Russian armed forces, but by evening, the Ukrainian armed forces had completely retaken it. Very heavy fighting took place in this sector, but since the Ministry of Defense has reported its clearing, this most likely means that Russian units not only cleared it, but also advanced further, possibly by several hundred meters, in eastern, western, northern and southern directions, generally creating a kind of security zone around the village itself. I'll also remind you that throughout April and March, there were repeated reports that combat had gradually begun on the southeastern outskirts of the settlement of Novoalexandrivka. Next, we move to the Kostyantynivka sector of the front, where a large number of reports are also coming from. We'll start with the H32 highway, where fighting continues for the settlement of Novopoltavka. Today, Ukrainian sources have begun spreading information that the Ukrainian armed forces and their command are increasingly concerned that the front line in this sector could be breached by Russian units. Active offensive operations are currently underway. Let me remind you that just yesterday, according to objective control footage, Russian units managed to fully neutralize and secure the approaches to Novopoltavka. In these clips, we can see how the Russian army completely destroyed the minefields and barriers, meaning Novopoltavka is no longer protected from the south and southeast. It's possible that active assault operations are now underway toward this village. Novopoltavka is a key settlement in this sector. The reason is that this small pocket of territory is surrounded on all sides by water obstacles. A reservoir here, a lake here, and slightly to the northeast, another reservoir and another lake. If Russian forces manage to take control of Novopoltavka and the nearby settlement of Tarasivka, Ukrainian units will find it extremely disadvantageous and difficult to counterattack, as the available corridors for maneuvers will be very narrow. If an attack comes from the north, Ukrainian forces would have to advance along the H-32 highway, completely flanked by rivers and water obstacles on both sides. If they try to counterattack from, say, the settlement of Malinivka, the situation is similar, a very narrow passage through which Ukrainian forces would have to push. Naturally, all such counterattacks by the Ukrainian Armed Forces, UAF, would likely be easily repelled by Russian units. Most importantly, control over Novopoltavka would allow Russia to establish strong flank security for further advances toward the Kleban-Buyk reservoir, specifically the area around the settlements of Vozdvizhenka, Rozivka, Panteleymonivka, Toretsk, and Kleban-Buyk, where significant developments have also been reported today. Earlier, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced in its daily briefing that units of the southern group of forces managed to regain and secure full control over the settlement of Rozivka, labeled as Alexandropol on Ukrainian maps. Moving slightly northward, there are reports from the settlement of Toretsk. Today, some cartographers confirmed that Ukrainian forces have completely withdrawn from the Zabalka district, and Ukrainian units are now attempting to organize their defense along the perimeter of settlements like Novospaska and Shcherbanivka. This is where the Ukrainian army plans to delay Russian forces for as long as possible. Everyone clearly understands that if Russia gains control over Novospaska, Shcherbanivka, Katerinivka, and Kleban-Buyk, Russian troops could advance directly toward the last remaining supply line, the H-20 highway, which runs from Kostyantynivka southward through settlements like Zorya, Stara Mykolaievka, Sukabalka, and Valentinivka. This flank, this defensive line, is critical for both Russia and Ukraine in terms of overall progress in the fighting for Kostyantynivka. Lyman sector, fighting continues moving to the Lyman sector, where combat persists. If we're talking about a potential Russian breakthrough west of Novolyubivka, there has been almost no new information from this area in the past 24 hours. Currently, the fiercest fighting is taking place near the settlement of Nadia, located northeast and east of Borova and Pisky-Radkivsky. Ukrainian forces managed to seize this settlement several weeks ago during a counterattack by the 3rd Assault Brigade Azov. Right now, it's difficult to determine the exact situation. Russian sources claim control over Nadia has been restored, but we continue to receive objective control footage confirming the presence of Ukrainian troops in the village. Some reports suggest that Russian forces are pushing south from Nadia toward Novosagivka and Novohorivka, while others claim that Ukrainian forces are still conducting strikes in the area. The main Ukrainian objective appears to be cutting the road between Ryhorodka and the settlements of Stepy and Kopanki. If Ukrainian forces manage to breach Russian defenses near Ryhorodka, it could disrupt supply lines to Russian-held Vyshnev, Stepy, and Kopanki, areas that have seen repeated Ukrainian counterattacks in recent weeks. In summary, the battle for Nadia remains intense. Both sides are attacking and defending, and neither has gained a clear advantage. The situation remains 50-50 for now. Northern Kupiansk direction, heavy drone strikes. Finally, we move to the northern Kupiansk direction, where numerous reports are also coming in. We'll start with the northern encirclement of the settlement. As you can see, a large number of geolocated strikes have been published today, showing FPV drone attacks by Russian operators targeting Ukrainian personnel and equipment. If we analyze the geography of these strikes, it appears that over the past few days, Ukrainian forces have attempted to organize a counter-push aimed at dislodging Russian units from the northern part of Kondrashivka. However, once again, based on this same objective control footage, we can conclude that the Russian side has repelled all Ukrainian counterattacks without exception, consolidated their positions, and possibly even advanced further. Unconfirmed reports from pro-Russian sources, without map verification or geolocation evidence, suggest that Russian units have already cleared most of Kondrashivka and are rapidly developing an offensive toward Mala-Shapkivka. If confirmed, this would mean Russian forces are currently operating within this red line, rapidly expanding their zone of control and tightening the encirclement of Kupiansk from both the north and northwest. The northernmost point, Kamianka. Next, we move to the absolute northern tip of the Kupiansk direction, the settlement of Kamianka. Today, a significant amount of information has emerged from this area. Some analysts have already marked parts of Kamianka as under Russian control. We've also updated our map, shading the southern part of the settlement in favor of Russian forces. Ukrainian sources have published footage showing a series of FPV drone strikes targeting Russian vehicles and armored personnel carriers. But the most interesting moment comes in the following seconds. We see Russian soldiers entering a two-story building, after which a Ukrainian FPV drone operator attempts to strike their positions. This building has been geolocated, confirming it as the same structure where Russian troops were operating. Based on this objective control footage, we've adjusted the map, marking southern Kamianka as under Russian control. Today, April 4th, the first verified footage has emerged confirming that the Russian army has begun assault operations toward Kamianka, with at least 10% of the village now under Russian control. It appears these attacks will not stop, and within the next few days, we may see an official report from the Russian Ministry of Defense or additional geolocated evidence confirming full Russian control over these areas. Northern axis, Belgorod and Sumy regions, moving further north toward Belgorod Oblast and Sumy Oblast, where fighting also continues. New objective control footage has surfaced from the settlement of Demidovka, showing Russian FPV drone operators targeting Ukrainian forward positions inside the village. This confirms that Ukrainian units, likely elements of the 225th Assault Battalion or 78th Regiment, though the exact composition isn't critical, still maintain a presence here, despite pro-Russian claims that they've been pushed out or blockaded. Separately, some sources report that a force of roughly 6,000 troops is currently concentrated in forested areas of Belgorod Oblast. This is a significant grouping that will undoubtedly require prolonged, heavy combat operations to dislodge. On the Sumy axis, Russian units have reportedly advanced south along the Lochnia River, below the settlement of Basivka. Several more tree lines and strongpoints have fallen under Russian control. These updates suggest the Russian army is now directly approaching the settlement of Lochnia, and fighting for its northern outskirts could begin imminently. Additional footage has emerged from the so-called Road of Life, Highway N07, which runs from Sumy toward Yunakivka and onward to Sudzha. The clips show Russian FPV operators ambushing Ukrainian soldiers moving from Sumy toward Yunakivka, proving the road is not just contested, but actively dominated. Russian drones aren't merely surveilling, they're lying in wait for hours, even days, to strike any Ukrainian patrols or vehicles. In one instance, a drone sat motionless on the road until a Ukrainian military truck appeared, only to be obliterated moments later. That's all for today, friends. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and stay safe. Until next time.